Admiral Vextar stood in the command center of his massive warship, looking at the holographic display that floated before him. The blue light made his gray skin look even more pale than usual. His forearms moved quickly across the control panels as he read through the new orders that had just arrived from the High Command on Dominion Prime. The Kethmori Admiral was not happy. After 30 years of military service and countless victories across the galaxy, they were giving him what looked like the easiest job possible. His yellow eyes scanned the mission briefing again, hoping he had missed something important. Target: Sol System, third planet designated Terra or Earth. He read aloud to his bridge crew. Species: human. Technology level: primitive. Expected resistance: none. Captain Zephylos, his second in command, walked over to look at the display. Sir, this seems like work for a single cruiser, not the entire Third Imperial Fleet. Vextar's main hands clenched into fists while his smaller secondary hands continued working the controls. The Third Fleet was the pride of the hegemony military. 200 massive dreadnought warships, each one capable of destroying all life on a planet's surface in a matter of hours. He had used this fleet to crush the rebellion on Zerium Prime, to bring the proud warrior race of the Thickmul to their knees, and to end the 100-year war with the Crystalline Collective. Now, they wanted him to use all this firepower against a world that had barely figured out how to leave its own atmosphere. Intelligence reports show they only discovered spaceflight about 60 years ago. Lieutenant Kreshva said from her position at the sensor station. Their fastest ships use chemical rockets. Chemical rockets, sir. That is technology our ancestors abandoned thousands of years ago. The bridge crew laughed. Even the youngest officer on the ship had grown up with faster-than-light travel and energy weapons that could melt through solid rock. The idea of using chemical explosions to push a ship through space seemed like something from ancient history books. What about their military? Vextar asked, though he already knew the answer would disappoint him. They fight each other constantly, replied Zephylos, reading from a smaller display. The planet is divided into nearly 200 separate nations, and they have been at war with each other for their entire recorded history. But their weapons are mostly metal projectiles and chemical explosives. No energy shields detected anywhere in their system. No plasma weapons. No quantum torpedoes. So they are savages who cannot even unite their own world, Vextar said with disgust. And High Command thinks we need 200 dreadnoughts to deal with them? The truth was that Admiral Vextar felt insulted. In his 30-year career, he had never faced an enemy this weak. The hegemony had conquered 847 worlds, and every single one had put up more of a fight than these humans were expected to. Even the peaceful farming worlds of the gentle ones had orbital defense platforms and energy shields. Sir, there must be a reason, Captain Zephylos suggested carefully. Perhaps there is something about this system that intelligence has not told us? Vextar pulled up the detailed scans of the Sol System. It was a typical yellow star with several planets. The third planet, Earth, was covered mostly in water with large land masses. The fourth planet was red and barren. There were several gas giants in the outer system, along with countless asteroids and small moons. The system does have unusual mineral wealth, he admitted. Rare elements that would be useful for our expansion into this part of the galaxy. And the planet's location would make a good refueling station for future operations. So this is about resources, not military threat, Lieutenant Kreshva observed. Exactly. We are glorified tax collectors, Vextar said bitterly. The High Command wants us to take this world so they can strip mine it and use it as a base. There will be no glorious battle, no test of our skills, no chance for honor. The Admiral walked to the large window that showed the stars streaking past as his fleet traveled through hyperspace. Soon they would drop back into normal space at the edge of the Sol system, and this embarrassing mission would begin. "How long until we arrive?" he asked. 6 hours, sir," answered the navigation officer. "And how long do you estimate it will take to complete our mission once we arrive?" Captain Zeflos looked at the tactical displays. "Based on their technology level and military capabilities, I would estimate complete planetary surrender within 2 hours. Probably less. 2 hours to conquer an entire world," Vextar muttered. "My grandfather fought in the siege of Corvash. That battle lasted 8 months and became legend. My father led the assault on the Drakari fortress worlds, a campaign that tested every skill he had learned in 40 years of warfare. And what do I get? A world full of primitives who will probably surrender the moment they see our ships." The bridge crew remained quiet. They all knew their admiral well enough to recognize when he was truly frustrated. Vextar was a warrior born and bred from a family line of great military leaders. To ask him to use the Third Fleet against such weak opponents was like asking a master swordsman to fight children with wooden sticks. "Perhaps we could make it more interesting," Lieutenant Kreshva suggested quietly. "We could limit ourselves to only using a few ships, just to make it a proper challenge." Vextar considered this for a moment, then shook his head. "No, orders are orders. High Command wants this done quickly and efficiently. They want these humans removed from their planet, so colonization can begin immediately." He turned back to face his crew, his forearms crossed in the traditional pose of Kethmori authority. "Prepare all ships for combat operations. When we drop out of hyperspace, I want every weapon system ready to fire. We will give these humans one chance to surrender peacefully. When they refuse, we will demonstrate why the Kethmori Empire rules this galaxy." "Sir, what if they do surrender immediately?" asked Tiflos. "They won't," Vextar replied with confidence. "Intelligence reports show they are too proud and too stupid to give up without a fight. They will resist, and then we will crush them. At least then this mission will be over quickly, and we can move on to something worthy of our abilities." As the Third Fleet continued its journey toward Earth, Admiral Vextar had no idea that his assumptions about human weakness were about to cost him everything. The Third Imperial Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system with a flash of brilliant light that briefly outshone the distant sun. 200 massive dreadnought warships appeared in perfect formation, their dark hulls reflecting the starlight like deadly mirrors. Each ship was over 3 kilometers long and bristled with enough firepower to level a small moon. Admiral Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, expecting to see empty space and perhaps a few primitive satellites orbiting the inner planets. Instead, his yellow eyes widened in surprise as the sensor displays lit up with contacts. "Captain Zeflos, what am I looking at?" he demanded, his forearms gesturing toward the holographic display that showed the entire solar system. His second-in-command stared at the readings with confusion. "Sir, I am not sure. The system appears to be heavily modified." Lieutenant Kreshva at the sensor station was frantically adjusting her controls, trying to make sense of what they were detecting. "Admiral, the asteroid belt between the 4th and 5th planets has been completely restructured. Instead of random rocks floating in space, there are artificial structures. Thousands of them." Vextar moved closer to examine the display. What should have been a normal asteroid belt was now a network of connected installations. Massive chunks of rock had been hollowed out and turned into something that looked suspiciously like weapons platforms. "Are you telling me these primitives have militarized their entire asteroid belt?" he asked in disbelief. "It appears so, sir. And that is not all." Kreshva highlighted different areas of the system on the display. "The 5th planet's moon shows similar modifications. The largest moon of the sixth planet has been converted into what appears to be a massive shipyard. And the dwarf planet Ceres. She paused, checking her readings again. Sir, Ceres is no longer a dwarf planet. It has been completely rebuilt into an artificial structure. Captain Zephylos moved to another sensor station to confirm the readings. These modifications would require centuries of work and more resources than most civilizations use in their entire history. Intelligence said these humans only achieved spaceflight 60 years ago. Perhaps intelligence was wrong, Admiral Vextar said slowly, though he was finding it hard to believe. The hegemony's spy networks were the best in the galaxy. They had never been this far off in their estimates before. Sir, I am detecting movement throughout the system, reported Lieutenant Kreshva. Multiple contacts approaching from various directions. They appear to be ships, but she frowned at her display. The designs are unlike anything in our databases. The main screen switched to show a tactical view of the approaching vessels. Vextar had seen thousands of different ship designs from hundreds of different species during his long career. But these human ships made no sense to him. They were built like metal boxes with engines strapped to the back. There were no smooth curves or artistic designs like most civilized races preferred. No energy shields flickered around their hulls. The armor plating looked thin and inadequate. But the power signatures coming from their engines were enormous. These ships are channeling their entire reactor output directly into their propulsion and weapon systems, observed the tactical officer. Commander Dekmar. No power is being diverted to defensive shields or life support redundancies. Barbaric, Vextar muttered. They are willing to sacrifice their own safety for slightly more firepower. What kind of insane species does that? As he spoke, more and more human ships appeared on the sensors. They were coming from every direction, emerging from hidden bases in the asteroid belt, rising from the surfaces of barren moons and decloaking near the gas giants. Within minutes, the Imperial fleet found itself surrounded by thousands of enemy vessels. Sir, I count approximately 8,000 human ships of various sizes, Lieutenant Kreshva reported. They range from small fighters to massive battleships. But Admiral, the largest ones they are larger than our dreadnoughts. Vextar's confidence began to waver for the first time in his career. 8,000 ships was more than the entire hegemony navy kept in this sector of space. And if some of them were bigger than his dreadnoughts, analysis of their weapon systems, he ordered. Commander Dekmar worked quickly at his station. Sir, this is very strange. They appear to be using kinetic weapons almost exclusively. Metal projectiles fired at extremely high velocities. Some kind of primitive railgun technology. No energy weapons detected. Kinetic weapons? Captain Zephylos laughed. What are they going to do? Throw rocks at us? But Admiral Vextar was not laughing. He had studied military history, and he knew that kinetic weapons could be devastating if used correctly. A piece of metal moving fast enough could punch through almost any armor. What kind of velocities are we talking about? He asked. According to these readings, they are accelerating projectiles to approximately 15% of light speed, Dekmar replied. But that cannot be correct. The energy requirements would be enormous. Show me their reactor signatures again. Vextar demanded that the display change to show the power output from the human ships. The numbers were staggering. Each human vessel was producing more raw energy than a Keth Mori dreadnought. But instead of distributing it across multiple systems like any sensible design, they were pouring everything into weapons and engines. They have no defensive shields, minimal life support, and paper-thin armor, he said, thinking out loud. But they can throw metal projectiles at near-light speed. Sir, incoming transmission from the human fleet, announced the communications officer. Put it on screen. The main display showed a human female in what appeared to be a military uniform, She had short gray hair and calm blue eyes that seemed to look directly at Admiral Vextar despite the vast distance between their ships. Imperial fleet? I am Admiral Sarah Chun of the Earth Defense Force, she said in accented but understandable galactic standard. You have entered sovereign human space. Turn your ships around and leave immediately, and there will be no further conflict between our peoples. The bridge crew burst into laughter. The idea that these primitive aliens were giving orders to the Third Imperial Fleet was absurd beyond belief. Even Captain Zephylos was chuckling at the humans' audacity, but Admiral Vextar was not laughing. Something about the human female's tone bothered him. She was not pleading or threatening. She was simply stating a fact, as if she knew something he did not. Human Admiral, he replied, opening a communication channel. I am Admiral Vextar of the Third Imperial Fleet of the Kethmori Hegemony. Your species will surrender this system immediately and submit to relocation. Your planet contains resources that the hegemony requires. Comply, and your people will be treated well in the work colonies. Resist, and we will glass your world. Admiral Chun's expression did not change. Admiral Vextar, I do not think you understand what you are dealing with. Humans do not surrender when our home is threatened. We have been preparing for this moment since we first reached the stars. Turn around now, and you can live to tell your superiors about this meeting. Are you threatening me, primitive? Vextar asked, his anger rising. No, Chun replied calmly. I am giving you fair warning. You clearly do not know anything about human military doctrine or our species' history. I am offering you one last chance to avoid a mistake that will cost you everything. Vextar had heard enough. No primitive alien was going to lecture him about military strategy. All ships, prepare to engage, he ordered, cutting off the communication. Let us show these savages what real military power looks like. The silence on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion was heavy with tension. Admiral Vextar stood before the main display, watching as thousands of human ships moved into attack formations around his fleet. His forearms were clasped behind his back in the traditional Kethmori pose of command, but inside, he was beginning to feel something he had not experienced in decades of warfare. Uncertainty. Sir, all ships report ready for combat. Captain Zephylos announced from his position at the tactical station. Plasma cannon arrays are charged, quantum torpedoes are loaded, and point defense systems are active. Energy shields at maximum power across the fleet, added Commander Dekmar. Our defensive systems can handle anything these primitives can throw at us. Admiral Vextar nodded, but his yellow eyes remained fixed on the display showing the human formations. There was something about the way they moved that bothered him. Most space battles he had fought followed predictable patterns. Fleets would form up in standard formations, exchange long-range fire, and then close to medium range for the decisive engagement. But the human ships were not forming up in any pattern he recognized. Instead, they seemed to be spreading out in random directions, with some groups accelerating toward his fleet at dangerous speeds, while others hung back in the asteroid field. Admiral, incoming transmission from the human fleet, reported the communications officer. I thought we had finished talking to them, Vextar said with irritation. Put it on screen. Once again, Admiral Sarah Chun appeared on the main display. She was now wearing a different uniform, this one with more armor plating and a helmet tucked under her arm. Behind her, Vextar could see what appeared to be a ship's bridge, but it looked more like a military bunker than the command center of a starship. Admiral Vextar, you have had time to consider our warning, Chun said. Your fleet is impressive, but you are making a terrible mistake. Withdraw now, and we can pretend this meeting never happened. Vextar's anger flared. Human, you are surrounded by the most powerful military force in this sector of the galaxy. Your primitive ships cannot possibly stand against Kethmori technology. Surrender now, and I promise your death will be quick." To his surprise, Admiral Chun actually smiled at this threat. "Admiral, let me ask you a question. In all your wars of conquest, have you ever fought a species that evolved on a death world?" "A what?" Vexstar asked, confused. "A death world," Chun repeated. "A planet where everything is actively trying to kill the dominant species. Where the weather can destroy cities, where predators hunt in organized packs, where natural disasters happen so often that the inhabitants consider them normal parts of life." Captain Zephylos looked up from his station with interest. "Sir, according to the xenobiology files, the human homeworld is classified as extremely hostile to life. Average temperature swings of over 60 degrees, frequent seismic activity, unpredictable weather patterns." "Your point, human?" Vexstar interrupted. "My point," Admiral Chun said, "is that humans are not like other species you have conquered. We did not evolve on peaceful garden worlds or carefully controlled environments. We evolved in hell, and we spent 10,000 years learning how to fight everything that tried to kill us, including each other." She gestured to something off-screen, and the display changed to show images of human history. Vexstar saw massive armies clashing with primitive weapons, cities burning, and weapons of incredible destructive power being used against other humans. "We have been at war constantly for our entire existence," Chun continued. "Not just small conflicts, but total wars where entire civilizations were wiped out. We developed weapons capable of destroying all life on our planet, and then we kept making them bigger. We learned how to fight in every environment our world could create. Underwater, in the air, underground, in Arctic cold, and desert heat." The images continued to flash across the screen. Vexstar saw humans fighting in conditions that would kill most galactic species in minutes. "When we finally reached space," Chun said, "we brought everything we had learned about warfare with us. Every human ship you see out there was designed by a species that spent millennia trying to kill itself as efficiently as possible." Admiral Vexstar had heard enough. "Impressive history, human, but this is modern warfare. Your primitive weapons cannot penetrate our energy shields." "Admiral," Chun said, and her tone became deadly serious, "I am going to give you one final demonstration of what you are dealing with. After that, there will be no more warnings." She gestured off-screen again, and suddenly one of the human ships broke away from the main formation. It was a medium-sized vessel, maybe half the length of a Kethmori dreadnought, and it began accelerating directly toward the Imperial fleet. "Sir, that ship is on a collision course with the Hammer of Justice," Lieutenant Kreshva reported from sensors. "But at its current speed, our point defense systems will destroy it long before it gets close." Vexstar watched with interest as the human ship continued its approach. The Hammer of Justice was one of his newest dreadnoughts, commanded by Captain Velter, an experienced officer who had fought in dozens of battles. Its energy shields could stop anything short of a direct hit from another dreadnought's main guns. "The human ship is accelerating," Commander Dekmar reported. "Current speed is..." "That cannot be right. What is their speed?" Vexstar demanded. "Sir, they are now traveling at 12% of light speed and still accelerating. At that velocity, even if we destroy the ship, the debris will still..." Dekmar never finished his sentence. The human ship, now traveling at nearly 15% of light speed, slammed into the Hammer of Justice with the force of a small star going supernova. The dreadnought's energy shields, designed to stop plasma blasts and quantum torpedoes, meant nothing against a projectile moving at relativistic speeds. The human ship punched through the shields like they were not even there, through the armor plating, and deep into the heart of the massive warship. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Hammer of Justice exploded in a ball of fire that briefly lit up the entire solar system. 3 kilometers of advanced Kethmari military engineering, along with its crew of 8,000, simply ceased to exist. The bridge of the Eternal Dominion was completely silent. Every officer stared at the empty space where one of their most powerful ships had been just seconds before. Captain Zeflos started to speak, then stopped. They turned their own ship into a weapon. The crew, Lieutenant Kreshva whispered. The human crew was still on board when they... Admiral Vextar felt something cold growing in his stomach. In 30 years of military service, he had never seen anything like this. No civilized species would sacrifice their own lives so casually, just to destroy a single enemy ship. On the main screen, Admiral Chun was still there, watching him with those calm blue eyes. "Now do you understand, Admiral?" she asked quietly. "Humans do not just fight to win battles. We fight to extinction. When our home is threatened, every ship becomes a missile. Every crew becomes a warhead, and every human becomes a weapon." She leaned forward slightly, and her voice became even more serious. "You came here expecting to fight frightened primitives. Instead, you have encountered a species that learned warfare from the most dangerous teacher in the universe, each other. Turn around and leave, Admiral. This is your last chance." For the first time in his career, Admiral Vextar hesitated. But he was a Kethmori admiral, commanding the pride of the Imperial fleet. He could not show weakness in front of his officers or his enemies. "All ships," he ordered, his voice steady despite his growing fear. "Open fire. Show these savages what happens when they threaten the hegemony." The 3rd Imperial Fleet opened fire with everything they had. The space around Earth erupted in violence as 200 Imperial dreadnoughts unleashed their full firepower at once. Brilliant streams of plasma energy and quantum torpedoes streaked across the darkness, creating a deadly light show that could be seen from the surface of Mars. Admiral Vextar watched from the bridge of the Eternal Dominion as his fleet's weapons reached out toward the human formations. This was the moment he had been waiting for. No matter how strange these humans were, no matter how willing they were to sacrifice their own ships, they could not possibly survive the combined firepower of the 3rd Imperial Fleet. Direct hits across multiple human vessels, reported Commander Dekmar from his tactical station. Enemy ships are taking heavy damage. But even as he spoke, something incredible was happening on the display screens. The human ships were not simply absorbing the Imperial fire and exploding like normal vessels would. Instead, they were moving. "Sir," Lieutenant Kreshva called out from sensors, her voice filled with disbelief. "The human ships are performing evasive maneuvers and..." "This cannot be correct. What are you seeing?" Vextar demanded. "Admiral, they are pulling acceleration forces that would kill any known organic life form. 15 Gs, 20 Gs, some of them are reaching 30 Gs of acceleration." Captain Zeflos moved to look over her shoulder at the sensor readings. "That is impossible. No biological creature can survive those forces. They would be crushed into paste." But the evidence was right there on their screens. Human ships were spinning, diving, and accelerating in patterns that seemed to ignore the basic laws of physics and biology. They moved like living things, dancing between the Imperial weapons' fire with grace that no artificial intelligence could match. "How are they doing this?" Vextar asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. "Sir, I am detecting no artificial gravity systems on their ships," Kreshva reported. "No inertial dampeners, no gravitational compensators. The human crews are experiencing the full force of every maneuver their ships make. And they are surviving it," Commander Dekmar added with amazement. "Not just surviving, but fighting effectively while pulling forces that would liquefy a Kethmori in seconds." Admiral Vextar began to understand what Admiral Chun had meant about humans evolving in hell. These creatures had not just adapted to survive in a hostile environment. They had evolved to thrive under conditions that would be instantly fatal to any other species, but the real horror was yet to come. "Admiral, the human ships are changing formation," Lieutenant Kreshva announced. They are all accelerating toward us." Vextar looked at the tactical display and felt his blood turn cold. Every single human ship in the system was now pointing directly at his fleet and accelerating at maximum speed. Not just a few ships like the first attack, but all 8,000 of them. "They cannot all be planning to ram us," Captain Zeflo said, but his voice lacked conviction. "That would be suicide for their entire fleet." "Sir." Incoming transmission from multiple human ships, the communications officer reported. "Put them on speakers," Vextar ordered. The bridge filled with the sound of human voices. Thousands of them, all singing the same song in their primitive language. The melody was simple but powerful, and even though he could not understand the words, Vextar could hear the defiance and determination in every note. "What are they singing?" he asked. The translation system worked for a moment, then provided subtitles on the screen. The humans were singing about their homeworld, about protecting their families, and about dying with honor in battle. But what chilled Vextar the most were the final lines of their song. "Better to die on our feet than live on our knees." "They're all going to ram us," he whispered, finally understanding. "Every single ship." "Sir, we need to retreat," Captain Zeflo said urgently. "We cannot fight an enemy that is willing to sacrifice everything." But it was already too late. The human ships had reached ramming speed, and they were spread across too wide an area for the Imperial fleet to escape. Vextar watched in horror as hundreds of human vessels slammed into his dreadnoughts, like bullets fired from the gods themselves. Each impact released the energy of a nuclear explosion. Imperial ships that had survived dozens of battles against civilized enemies were torn apart by chunks of metal moving at impossible speeds. The humans had turned their lack of safety systems into a weapon, using their own willingness to die as the ultimate tactical advantage. "The Iron Fist is gone," Commander Thekmar reported, his voice shaking. "Direct ramming impact. The thunder of war has lost main power. The victorious dawn." "Sir, I am reading massive internal explosions." More and more reports flooded in as the human assault continued. But the most terrifying thing was not just that the humans were destroying Imperial ships. It was how they were doing it. Each human crew sang their battle song until the moment of impact. Never wavering, never showing fear. "Sir." Emergency message from Admiral Chun, the communications officer announced. "Put her on screen," Vextar ordered. Though he dreaded what she might say, Admiral Chun appeared on the display once again. But this time, she was aboard a different ship. Behind her, Vextar could see damage from weapons fire and emergency lights flashing. "Admiral Vextar, I tried to warn you," she said, and for the first time, her voice carried sadness rather than anger. "Humans learned warfare from the most vicious teacher imaginable, ourselves. For 10,000 years, we practiced total war against enemies who shared our own determination and intelligence." Another wave of human ships slammed into the Imperial fleet, and Vextar felt his own ship shudder from a nearby explosion. "Your species conquered 800 worlds," Chen continued. "But you always fought enemies who valued their own lives above victory. You never encountered a species that considers death in defense of home to be the highest honor possible." The tactical display showed the horrible truth. In less than 2 minutes, the Third Imperial Fleet had been reduced from 200 ships to fewer than 50. And the humans were still coming. "Admiral," Captain Zeflo said quietly, "we need to abandon ship. The humans have broken through our defenses." Vextar looked around his bridge at the officers who had served with him for years. Good soldiers all, who deserved better than to die in this disaster. But even as he considered surrender, He knew it would not matter. The humans were not taking prisoners. "Sir, final message coming in," the communications officer reported. This time, it was not Admiral Chun on the screen, but a young human male wearing the uniform of a fighter pilot. His ship was clearly damaged and leaking atmosphere, but he was still smiling. "Hey, Alien Admiral," the human said in accented galactic standard. "My name is Lieutenant Jake Morrison, Earth Defense Force. I wanted you to know something before we finish this." The human ship was accelerating toward the Eternal Dominion, and Vextar could see that there was no way to avoid the impact. "You picked the wrong species to mess with," Morrison continued, his smile getting wider. "Humans do not just fight to win. We fight because fighting is what we are. And when you threaten our home..." He paused to check something off-screen, then looked back at the camera. "Well, you are about to find out what happens when you make that mistake." The transmission cut out just as Lieutenant Morrison's fighter crashed into the bridge of the Eternal Dominion at 15% of light speed. In the last microsecond before the impact, Admiral Vextar finally understood what humanity truly was. A species that had evolved beyond the normal limits of biological warfare, becoming living weapons that could not be defeated, because they had already accepted death as the price of victory. The Third Imperial Fleet, pride of the Kethmori hegemony, ceased to exist exactly 137 seconds after the battle began. The emergency session of the Hegemony High Council convened in the Great Chamber on Dominion Prime exactly 6 hours after the last transmission from the Third Imperial Fleet. The massive circular room, carved from black stone and decorated with the banners of 800 conquered worlds, had never been the site of such panic and confusion in its 1,000-year history. Chancellor Mordak, supreme leader of the Kethmori Empire, stood at the center of the chamber, his forearms trembling with rage and fear. Around him, the 12 members of the High Council sat in their ornate chairs, each one representing a different sector of their vast galactic empire. "Explain to me," Mordak said, his voice echoing off the stone walls, "how an entire Imperial fleet simply vanished." General Vacheron, the head of military intelligence, rose from his seat with obvious reluctance. "Your Excellency, at approximately 14:30 Galactic Standard Time, we lost all contact with Admiral Vextar and the Third Fleet. Their last transmission indicated that they had engaged the human defensive forces. And then nothing, sir. Complete communications blackout. Our long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures consistent with a large-scale battle. But by the time our monitoring stations could get detailed readings, there was nothing left but debris." Council member Telenara leaned forward in her chair. "Are you saying that 200 of our most advanced warships were destroyed by primitive aliens who had barely achieved spaceflight?" "The evidence suggests exactly that, Counselor," General Vacheron replied miserably. "We have since launched emergency reconnaissance missions to the Sol system. What they found?" He paused, clearly struggling with the words. "The debris field extends across most of the inner system. Every single ship in the Third Fleet was completely destroyed." Chancellor Mordas's yellow eyes blazed with fury. "How is this possible?" "Our intelligence reports said these humans were savages fighting with chemical rockets and metal projectiles." "Our intelligence was partially correct," admitted Intelligence Director Kethfall, another member of the Council. "The humans do use kinetic weapons and chemical propulsion, but we severely underestimated their tactical capabilities and their psychological profile." "Meaning what, exactly?" Director Kethfall activated a holographic display in the center of the chamber. Images appeared showing the battle as recorded by long-range sensors and the last transmissions from Imperial ships. "Sir, the humans employed a military doctrine unlike anything we have encountered before. Instead of engaging in conventional fleet combat, They used their entire force as kinetic weapons. Every single human ship participated in ramming attacks at relativistic speeds. The council members watched in stunned silence as the recordings showed human vessels slamming into Imperial dreadnoughts with suicidal determination. They sacrificed their entire fleet to destroy ours, Councillor Talanara said in disbelief. What kind of species commits total suicide just to win a single battle? A species that evolved under conditions we cannot imagine, replied Director Kethval. We have since conducted a detailed analysis of the human homeworld. Their planet is classified as a Class 12 death world, the highest possible rating for environmental hostility. The display changed to show images of Earth, massive storms that could level cities, earthquakes that split continents, and predators that hunted in organized packs. The dominant life forms on this world evolved under constant threat of extinction, the director continued. But more importantly, the humans spent their entire history at war with each other. They developed military technology and tactics through 10,000 years of conflict against opponents who shared their own intelligence and determination. General Vashran stepped forward to point at specific sections of the display. Look at these recordings of the final battle. The human ships perform maneuvers that would instantly kill the crew of any normal vessel. They sustain acceleration forces that exceed the tolerance limits of every known biological species. Yet they survived, Chancellor Mordak observed grimly. Not only survived, but fought effectively under those conditions. Sir, the humans have evolved beyond normal biological limitations. They are, in effect, a weaponized species. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. For over 1,000 years, the Kethmori Empire had expanded across the galaxy, conquering world after world with the confidence that came from superior technology and military organization. They had never encountered a species that could match their tactical skills, let alone exceed them. What is the current status of our forces in that sector? Mordak asked. Sir, we have already received reports from 3 other systems, General Vashran said reluctantly. The humans did not limit their response to defending their home system. Within hours of destroying the 3rd Fleet, human attack forces appeared at our bases on Kepler 442, Volf 359, and Proxima Centauri. Our bases in those systems? Completely destroyed, sir. The humans used the same ramming tactics, but on an even larger scale. They appeared to have hidden ships throughout that entire region of space. Councillor Remtak, the oldest member of the High Council, spoke for the first time. How many ships are we talking about? Hundreds? Thousands? General Vashran's voice became even quieter. Sir, our best estimates suggest the humans have a fleet of at least 50,000 combat vessels, possibly more. And every single one of them appears to be designed for kamikaze attacks. The number hit the Council like a physical blow. 50,000 ships was larger than the entire hegemony navy, if the humans were willing to use all of them as suicide weapons. There is more, Director Kethval said, his voice grim. We intercepted a transmission broadcast on all Imperial frequencies approximately 1 hour ago. A new image appeared on the display, a human female in military uniform, standing on what appeared to be the bridge of an enormous warship. Chancellor Mordak recognized her immediately from the intelligence files. Admiral Sarah Chun, the director confirmed, military commander of the Human Defense Forces. The transmission was sent from a vessel that our sensors indicate is over 20 kilometers long. The recording began to play, and Admiral Chun's voice filled the chamber. Hegemony High Council? This is Admiral Chun of the Terran Federation Navy. By now you have learned what happened to your 3rd Fleet. You sent them to conquer our home and enslave our people. That was a mistake. Her image was replaced by scenes of human shipyards. Massive installations that stretched across entire asteroids and moons. You assumed we were a primitive species because we use kinetic weapons and chemical propulsion. You were wrong. We use these technologies because we perfected them through 10,000 years of warfare against the most dangerous enemy in the galaxy, ourselves. The display showed human ships under construction. Thousands of them, each one larger and more heavily armed than the last. For the past 60 years, since we first detected your empire's expansion in our direction, we have been preparing for this moment. Every human colony, every asteroid mine, every orbital platform has been converted to military production. Admiral Chun reappeared on screen, her expression cold and determined. You have seen what happens when humans fight to defend our home. Now you will learn what happens when we go on the attack. We are not like the other species you have conquered. We do not value our individual lives above victory. We do not negotiate with slavers. And we do not forgive threats against our families. The transmission showed images of massive human fleets moving through space, heading in the direction of known hegemony systems. We are coming for you now, Admiral Chun concluded. All of you. Every world, every base, every ship that flies under your flag. We will not stop until your empire is ash and your threat to humanity is ended forever. You wanted a war with Earth. Congratulations, you got one. The transmission ended, leaving the High Council chamber in absolute silence. Finally, Chancellor Mordak spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. How long until they reach our core systems? General Vacheron consulted his datapad. At their current speed, approximately 18 months. Sir, 18 months to prepare for a war against an enemy that cannot be defeated because they have already accepted death as the price of victory. Councillor Talanara said quietly. What do we do? Asked another council member. Chancellor Mordak looked around the chamber at the banners of 800 conquered worlds. Then at the display still showing the human fleet advancing toward hegemony space. We pray, he said finally, that they are willing to accept